Hey Tim, you were talking about house rules, and that got me thinking about how lately I've gotten less and less chances to run some of the games that I really like the most, like Werewolf the Apocalypse, Inquisitor Dark Ages, or even that Wereshark game, Rokea, that I've often lamented about how nobody is really that interested in. And a lot of times when I go into different gaming groups, no matter how great the players are, no matter how much fun I have, no matter how receptive they are to a lot of ideas, one thing that usually sticks is that they want to play D&D specifically. They want, like, if it doesn't matter if you're pitching it as like a dark horror themed D&D or a light-hearted D&D, a high magic, low magic, anything of the sort. As long as it's D&D, people feel comfortable with it. People don't feel intimidated about playing in a system they're not familiar with. They feel comfortable with the rules, so they feel like they know them. They feel like they can come up with character ideas in their own head without even having to reference the book all that much. And it's also like it's the poster boy of the hobby. Like, I used to lament that quality about it quite a bit, that a lot of people think that role playing equals D&D, and you know, to a lot of people, yeah, that might be the case, but I've kind of learned that D&D having that position is kind of a diplomatic position. It's kind of like, okay, if you feel apprehensive about trying these different role-playing games that I have on my shelf, then I can maybe use D&D to siphon like a lot of those ideas, and I can use a lot of the cool concepts, settings, and mechanics that I have in those different games and just kind of transport them into D&D. Because for a lot of people, it's the kind of brand familiarity. It's like if you present someone with, hey, here's a new cool superhero comic book line. Oh, is it Marvel or DC? No, it's actually Image Comics. Like, I don't know about that. You know, a lot of people, that's just a failing of humanity. You know, what feels safe, what feels familiar, what you feel comfortable with. And even if you're a receptive person, that can sometimes be kind of a hurdle. You know, we're all humans. But I've come across so many cool things that are mechanics based that even though I know a lot of people say that if you're gonna house rule a system to oblivion, basically, why not just play a different system that, you know, is more like the one you're trying to create with all these house rules. But if you're in a situation like this where people want D&D, you know, I feel like these are valid things to do. Like, for example, I love the noble house creation mechanics in the Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game. And if I ever run D&D that's centered around like political intrigue and social battles in the kind of a court system and the kind of political sphere and the kind of noble families, you know, backstabbing one another and spreading rumors and lies and having spies all around, you can bet your ass I'm gonna have the players make their noble house using the Song of Ice and Fire RPG house creation rules. I also really like the kind of drama point system that's very familiar actually to the inspiration point system, but I might borrow it enough to where I'd say, okay, like if you spend one inspiration point, then it works the way it does in D&D. But if you spend two, maybe you can negate a skill roll with two inspiration points to where the result will automatically be just okay. Nothing great, but at least you can be sure you won't fail utterly. And then maybe if you spend 3 inspiration points, you can take that kind of a narrative control that games like A Song of Ice and Fire allow you to take, like where if you're being brought to be executed like Ned Stark, you can spend those points and get yourself pardoned and sent to the wall instead of dying, you know, something like that. Or if you're trapped in a closet and the room room is full of enemies, suddenly a crash, a big crashing sounds in the hallway, and they all file out of the room, and you can get out of the closet and escape through the window or something like that. When you get that sort of narrative control as a sort of a reward for gaining those points through good role play and being, being like on your top game, that can be very rewarding and cool. And there's a lot of different things, like I've talked about the kind of poker style die rolls from Cthulhu Tech, and I think other games might have something similar to that as well, to where you could come up with different reasons of why the players are encountering magic that doesn't really work the same way as all the other magics that they've kind of learned to understand through their arcane knowledge and schooling and innate kind of sorceress powers and whatnot. And all of a sudden it works very differently. It almost like works to affect different part of your brain or your soul or something. Like all of a sudden your kind of primordial lizard brain kind of lights up, and all of a sudden the game master gives you 4 d10s, and you're rolling 4 d10s trying to find either a single biggest score out of those dice, or if there's doubles, taking those doubles, and that's a one big score, or getting a straight, like 4, 5, 6. Oh yeah, that's awesome. And then rolling that against like whatever the obstacle or NPC or spell or whatever is. But that would be kind of a neat thing. Like I ran D&D a little while ago where an encounter was basically the players sitting down playing cards, and I had a real deck of cards, and the players had to play that card game in a character, and they kind of had the strategy of giving a good competitive card game match to the NPC so that they will either lose or win with dignity, whereas another group might have thought to let the Wookiee win, so to say, So you can come up with all sorts of different things like that. And when it comes to like setting ideas, the D&D is awesome in the sense like where just like how it pushes a lot of dice mechanics into the forefront, people become kind of very susceptible and receptive to die roll related kind of off-the-wall kind of surprises like that. Like it's the same sort of thing where if out of behind a tree all of a sudden a monster that's not in the monster manual suddenly pops out, they're like, ooh, neat, something I didn't expect, because the dice mechanics are so at the forefront of the mechanics, and so like at the forefront of the players thinking. A lot of times when they enter different situations, they often think of like going through their abilities of, okay, what can I do to maybe like benefit myself or like solve a conflict or anything like that using my abilities. Ooh, I get a D6 out of this. It's like if you have that so actively there, I think they're a lot more susceptible and receptive to mechanics that are not rules as written, as long as you have a certain kind of attitude about it, as long as it's like fun and playful, not something to fuck with the players, let's say. Because then it sucks. It's like if you as a player have to expect death around every corner, of course you want to find security in your knowledge of the rules as written. And if somebody throws a curveball at that, and your character comes across a lot of misfortune and sucky stuff because of that, that's gonna ruin your session. That's gonna ruin everybody's fun, But yeah, like with D&D, it's also the fact that it's one of the biggest kinds of games where it basically tells you to use the skeletal structure of D&D and come up with your own setting. And even though it has its own Greyhawks and Planescapes and Ravenlofts, for some reason, whatever it is, those never really captured my fancy, whether it's for aesthetic reasons or whether it's for, I don't know, the melodrama or the highness of the fantasy or whatnot. It's just never really been my thing. But just about every other RPG I really love is all about loving the setting. So, in that sense, it's easy to take something like Song of Ice and Fire. Okay, let's set this D&D campaign into the kind of noble court, and it'll feel a lot like Game of Thrones. It'll feel a lot like Song of Ice and Fire RPG. And then let's come up with a pitch for a campaign where all of the characters are like, let's say, a secret society of paladins or servants of paladins or something, who hunt some sort of an ancient evil that nobody else can like see or comprehend or anything like that, that works on some sort of a different wavelength or works through some sort of a different magical manifestation that people who have studied arcane tricks and magical things are not able to process. So it's very much like Werewolf the Apocalypse or Inquisitor Dark Ages, where you would be like secret society of hunters who have like this ability to save people from threats they're not even aware of, that they're under the influence of, and things like that. There's endless opportunities to do that. So in conclusion, basically, I'm just my point is that even though a lot of people say that you could just run a different game if you want to do things very differently than they are in D&D and so on and so forth, but if you have like the setting that I have, the kind of situation that I have, that a lot of people have, that people just want to play D&D. Well, okay, let's go on a sailboat and sail into a different part of the continent where people are more akin to samurais, because you really want to run that Legends of the Five Rings samurai game, but people are like, I don't know about that. But when it's D&D and all of a sudden there's samurais and or samurai-like nobles and paladins and whatnot with all the similar Bushido style codes or whatnot, all of a sudden it becomes very palatable. So just like with a lot of diplomatic things or like compromises and solving conflicts in real life, solving them in a creative endeavor, in a hobby like role-playing, a lot of these things need to be dealt with. Okay, what do the players want? How can I give them what I want without completely just stomping on my personal enjoyment as a game master as well? Because a lot of people frame being a game master as being like a servant or like a customer service agent, someone who needs to like put their enjoyment on the shelf just to please the players, because as long as the players are happy, you're being a good GM. I think that can also kind of make people who are kind of insecure about their abilities kind of turn them into like martyrdom, like throwing away their sense of enjoyment as game masters as long as the players are satisfied, and that kind of sucks because everybody's supposed to have a good time around the table. So this is a good way, just like in real life, in real conflicts, like using kind of like the way empathy works, of understanding why people want to play what they want to play, and finding a way of like a level playing field, like finding the kind of ingredients for satisfying compromise. And I think D&D, using D&D but throwing in all this kind of off the wall or other setting, like reminiscent stuff of other settings, I think that's an awesome way of doing it. Even though D&D focuses a lot on monster killing, werewolves also focus on monster killing. Inquisitors also focus on monster killing, and I think if you want to make like a game set in like a nobleman's like court, like if you watch Game of Thrones, there's a lot of duels, there's a lot of little battles, because noble families, especially like in Rome and places like that, they went constantly into war with one another. So you can find all kinds of ways of making it very much like action adventure while being set in a noble noble court or something like that. One game that I've often lamented of not ever getting to play is the Wereshark game, the Rokea game, and wouldn't you know it, in my D&D game, everybody's prepping up to go on an underwater adventure where they'll get like a water-breathing magical items, and they're gonna go help a humanoid crab colony from these Lovecraftian Cthulhu tentacle monsters from trying to take their natural resources and stuff like that and killing their younglings and all that. So all of a sudden, after every player was against playing Weresharks because a game set underwater felt intimidating to their kind of sense of imagination, and also kind of like, oh, I don't know about this whole Wereshark idea. All of a sudden, when it's D&D and they get to do the same thing, all of a sudden it's very palatable. So, I don't know, yeah. I could frame this as house rules themed stuff. So yeah, there's your video.